I'm Todd. For those I've not met, I'm Todd Shapiro, President and CEO of the Illinois CPA Society. Dan Rahill, our board chair, and I welcome you this morning. So we want to talk a little bit about where the profession is, where the profession's going. Before I do that, I start every presentation virtually, and I pretty much start every presentation. I say this every night when I go to bed and every morning when I wake up, with the mission of the Illinois CPA Society. And I say that because I truly, truly believe that it's important for every one of our staff, for every one of our volunteers, for every one of our members to understand why we're here. Why we're here and why we're trying to accomplish what we're trying to accomplish. And it's very simple. It's to enhance the value of the CPA profession. That's what we're here for. To enhance the value of the CPA profession. Really to hopefully help all of you succeed. We do that through 4 ways. We call them the 4 strategic pillars: education, advocacy, information, and connection. Those are the way we think we can deliver on enhancing the value of the CPA profession. And if you think about the event here today, education and connections, hopefully you got to talk to people at your table. There's a little bit of education hopefully goes on. There's some information. The only thing we're really missing is advocacy. Actually, there's a little bit of advocacy here today also, because we do have, I meant to mention, Martha Reggie, if you could stand for a quick second. Martha is the Associate Counsel, General Counsel with the Division of Financial Profession Regulations. No, you're not supposed to go up and lambast her with questions, concerns, and arguments, complaints. But it is great to have them here. We have probably the strongest, and this is important for the profession, we probably have, the society has the strongest relation we've had in years and years and years with the Division of Financial Professional Regulation. That's critical as we move forward to oversee and manage this profession. So we're even going to bring a little bit of advocacy in here today. So let's jump in and talk about where we are today, and we'll talk a little bit about where we think the future is going to go. This is meant to be a good dialogue. We're doing our 3rd one in the Chicago area. We did one in Oak Brook, Dan and I, last week. We had 30 minutes of questions at the end of it. We had very few yesterday, so I encourage your questions. If you disagree, I encourage you to disagree. That's okay. We don't have to agree on everything. So I encourage your questions, I encourage your comments, your feedback, your thoughts. That would be great. So as we do that, if you want to hold to the end, I will stay, Dan and I will stay, as long as there are questions. I mean, if there's one person sitting at this table and he wants to ask a question at 11:30, I'll be here, because that's what it's all about. It's about interaction and getting your thoughts and your feedback. So where are we today? The profession is in a very good place. You know, we went through this period of time where in the early part of the 2000s where the profession actually took a little bit of dip in the public eye. We all know there were some issues that occurred, and we'll talk a little bit more about that in a little bit later when we get into regulation. But where is it at today? Well, the ICPA, we have a very good relationship with the ICPA, so this information comes from them. They commission a study every 2 years, and it says, how do business decision makers, BDMs, view the profession? Well, they view it pretty darn strongly. They view the CPA credential as the number one, bar none, number one credential when they're looking at financial credentials. In fact, the only profession that rated higher were physicians. So the good news is, I think, this says that the business decision makers look at this profession in a very, very positive light. And a second point, business decision makers were asked, and 75% agreed, that they would be more confident in work done by a CPA than an accountant who is not a CPA. 75%. That says something about this credential. And really, that's to your credit, because you're the people that made this credential. You're the people that brought this reputation to where it is. 72% of investors agreed with the same thing. They're more confident in work done by a CPA than an accountant not a CPA. 71%, and my son, who was studying for his last part of the exam, will agree with this, that becoming a certified CPA requires more rigorous training and testing than any other financial credential. I hope he can actually agree and pass that last part, but we'll see. So he's actually a subscriber to and I hope he has no friends in here. He's a subscriber to if I take it more than once, is that a good thing? So good thing about the profession, I think it's a testament to everything and all the work that you do every day of the week. So that said, there are some challenges. 2014, 2015, we have some challenges that the profession has to stand up to and look at and deal with, and it affects all of you every day. And there's an array of things we're going to go through some of these things. But the overall theme that I see when I think about some of the challenges is I think of a shifting landscape. And if you think about when you go back to your offices on a regular basis every day, it feels like, I don't know, but it feels like something's always changing. So it's hard to keep up because the landscape just keeps shifting. Think about an earthquake and you're standing there, it's like changing this, changing that. How am I supposed to keep up? And that's one of the challenges. So what are some of those things? Well, when I think about a shifting landscape, the first thing that comes to mind, and this is not just what I hear, this is what I hear. You know, I've been lucky enough to be out and talk to over 60 firms and companies in the last 18 months and hundreds of members, hundreds and hundreds of members. This is the feedback I'm getting. Complexity. Constantly. Complexity is a challenge that everyone has to deal with on a regular, and it doesn't matter what part of the business you're in, what part of the profession you're in. If you're in a company, you have to deal with private company reporting. And, you know, and everyone's trying to make it easier. The ICPA launched their financial reporting framework for small and medium-sized entities. So there's an option. Oh, by the way, and then there's the PCC, which has come out with private company standards that go along and are GAAP compliant. Oh, and then you can also use IFRS. It's a litany of, it's an alphabet soup. Now the goal is to make things easier, and I think it's going to long term, but the question today is it easier or is it more complex? You combine that with a continued explosion of standards, and it's awful darn hard if you're in a company to try and keep up. Awful darn hard to keep up. If you're in the tax side of the business, and I'm sure there's a lot of people in here on the tax side of the business, show of hands, how many people do tax work? How many people give tax advice to their clients? How do you do that? I don't know how you do it. Here's news, I think you all know this, lightning news, you know, the Congress passed the 2014 tax extenders in December of 2014 that expired, on December 31st of 2014. And they may, I'm told, may pass the extenders sometime during this current calendar year to apply to this year, which will be retroactive for your clients all the way back to January 1st. How do you do planning? When the landscape is shifting so dramatically, so regularly, you don't know what you're doing. You know what you're doing, but it's hard to understand what rules you're going to be playing with. Again, challenges you have, complexity you deal with. In this world of complexity, you then have this come into play. Everything gets so complex, the demand for specialization is skyrocketing. And if I ask for a show of hands, I'm not going to do it, but if I ask for a show of hands of everybody in the room who, when you started your career, you did audit and you did tax. Of course, that's what you did. You did audit and you did tax. Everyone did audit and you did tax if you worked in a firm. If you worked in a company, you did all kinds of things. Anything from closing the books to filing the tax returns in a company. Not today. Go into most firms today. You have the audit people and you have the tax people. And once in a while, they'll borrow, but not often, especially in a larger firm. There's the audit people and there's the tax people. Why? Specialization has driven this level of complexity that we can't just, it inhibits our ability to move staff around. Same in a company. Things are so, I always say, you know, it used to be you had to know everything a mile wide and an inch deep. Well, you know, now it's become a mile wide and a mile deep. Well, that's not reasonable. So now we know everything an inch wide and a mile deep. But then it takes away our staffing flexibility. So this demand for specialization is, again, causing us to deal with the shifting landscape of how do I keep up and how do I deal with the challenges today and tomorrow. While that's going on, trying to stay ahead of the game, well, what's the number one growth opportunity for firms that we hear? The number one growth opportunity for firms is strategic business advice. Now I say that, and that's a great thing. It's how we add value to businesses. How do you add value to businesses? Strategic business advice. Help your clients grow. On the other hand, I will tell you, and we're going to talk more about this in a minute, we cannot take our eye off of compliance work. Because the public looks to us to be the safeguard for compliance. Compliance audit is one of the things that we do that truly protects the public good. We cannot take our eye off of that. And I say that because I think another area of shifting landscape is regulatory creep. What do I mean by regulatory creep? We've already seen it happen. In the 2000s, we saw the PCAOB come into play when they took over public company audits. Regulatory creep. Why did it happen? Well, there was a major failure that occurred. And it drove the government to say, we're going to get involved in this and we're now going to oversee this. Well, as recent, I believe, was in 2013-14, the PCAOB, there were some failures in the area of securities. So what happened? The PCAOB comes in and said, well, we're now going to take over broker-dealer audits. The question isn't, and this is in response, I truly don't believe people at the PCAOB go, I wonder what we can take over next. I don't think they say that. I think they look at what's going on. So the challenge isn't going to be whether we have more regulatory creep. The question is what and when. I'll give you an example. DOL. You're going to be hearing some stuff in the upcoming months about DOL issues. DOL audits that fail. Say that fast 5 times. DOL audits that have failures. Well, the challenge with that is going to be, is that the DOL going to say at one point in time, hey, we're going to take over PCOB type functions, start doing it ourselves. How do you prevent that? How do you mitigate the risk of regulatory creep? And we're going to talk, I'm going to talk a couple minutes about audit quality and about quality within the profession. And this, in my mind, and I truly believe this is the way you prevent this. We need to make sure that we focus to the highest level on quality within this profession. I'm lucky enough to be in the National Peer Review Board, so this is something that we talk about all the time. One of the things, and again, I said we work very closely with the ICPA. This is a huge issue across the profession. They issued back in the summer a paper called the Enhanced Audit Quality Paper, EAQ. I don't know if anybody here read the EAQ. It had some provocative things in there, but it was very focused on one thing, and it was improving short-term and mid-term quality. The comments were due back in November. In fact, I'm going to a peer review board meeting next week, and we're going to talk about implementing the things that were in that paper that got comments back on and go through the comments. What were some of the things that were talked about? Well, looking at the peer review process. This is one of the few professions, and we can all be proud of this, one of the few professions that self-polices. And yes, I said self-polices because peer review really is a way to look and ensure the quality is at the highest level. But it's going to have to change a little bit. It's going to have to become a little more focused on making sure things are done correctly. So it's going to look at peer reviewers. Do we have the best peer reviewers in the field? Do our peer reviewers need more training? Are the peer reviews being done correctly? And in fact, are the clients, are we reacting correctly to peer review issues that we find in clients? So that's going to be one focus in the short term that I think you're going to hear about. The other is going to be on looking at ethics enforcement and quality control. So in the short term, how can we inject quality into the profession, hopefully again to mitigate that potential for regulatory creep. Long term, and you'll hear more about this from the society, the ICPA also issued a paper that is titled Practice Monitoring the Future. And if you want provocative, this is the paper to read. Because I've heard all kinds of things about it that I'm not sure people have read it, but their view on it. And it's really looking at going away from our current process of quality control and looking at how we can actually have real-time, real-time detection of deficiencies. So I'm not going to talk a lot about that because the paper has been issued. If you haven't seen it, I encourage you to go to the ICPA website and look at it. We will, in fact, be promoting it. It is just a discussion paper. They're looking for comments in June of 2015, the ICPA. As you read it, I would encourage you to do two things. One, be open-minded. Be open-minded. That's one thing that's important. And the second thing I would tell you it's important as you look through this paper is remember it's a concept. Everything in the paper is not going to happen exactly. First time I saw a presentation on this, somebody said it was presented as, well, this is going to be implemented by 2020. Well, the second time I heard, because the reaction was such, the second time I heard the same person talk about the paper, they said, this is a concept. I think 6 or 7 times in her presentation said, this is a concept that's going to change. So I don't want you to overreact, but I want you to think openly about it, think open-minded about it. So regulatory creep, one goal. If you had one goal for why we want to focus on quality, regulatory creep is part of it, but it gets back to the goal, which is increase quality and protect the public good. Shifting landscape, education. And again, I did not use the term CPE. I've heard, how many people are here for the free breakfast? How many people are here for the free CPE? How many people just lied? Okay. CPE, great thing. I believe, and I think you read what's out there, we have got to move, the state requires us, Martha's department, we're not going to get mad at Martha, requires every licensed CPA in the state to have 120 hours of CPE, continuing professional education. That's great. There are, believe it or not, this is going to shock you, there are people who think, boy, I got to get my 120 hours of CPE. Why? Because the state says I have to get my 120 hours of CPE. We need to move away from 120 hours of CPE to I need education. I need to be a lifelong learner to stay on my game and stay ahead of the competition. And we can't think about, I just need my 120 hours of CP. Once I satisfy the state's requirements, I'm done. It's got to be focused on competency, not on compliance. Absolutely has to be. And that changes the way we learn things today. Technology is going to give us the ability to engage learners in a different, not just technology, the way you're going to start seeing courses from the Illinois CPA Society and others that change the way we learn. Because for a long time, I love it when you go to a conference and they set it classroom style. Everyone know what classroom style is? It's like the least engaging way to learn. We have rows and rows and rows of tables, and I talk and you listen. Well, here's news. That's not the best way to learn. We need to engage learners. I tell this, and I've told this, you may have heard me tell this, I apologize, but I'm going to say it again. I'm lucky enough to be married to a saint. My wife is a first grade teacher. She is now with about 26 and 7-year-olds. Bless her heart. I went to her class one day, and about 10 minutes, I was like, I'm out of here. I can't handle this. Whoa, you're not teaching, you're managing chaos. So one day, I do two things. Yes, I say the mission before I go to bed and when I wake up at night. One day I was sitting at home, and we were watching TV one night, sitting in the family room, and I looked at her, and I was on a task force with the ICPA about the future of learning, and I looked at her, and I had this just pearl of wisdom. And I said, did you know that engaged learners learn more? And she looked at me and she goes, duh. I thought I was so smart. And she goes, duh. But it's true. So we need to get away from this and more into interacting. Learn from each other. People learn from each other. Now, technology is going to give us the ability to do that, and that's going to help a lot. Why do we do all this? Because I'll tell you right now, competition is going to be fierce. Within firms, big firms, small firms, there's more mergers and acquisitions going on now than ever before. I was talking with one of our board members yesterday about the future of firms, and the challenge you run into is what do you do? How do you stay ahead of the competition? And not just from firms, it's going to be from others outside firms. You see specialties, you see specialists coming in, trying to encroach on CPA territory. Competition is going to be fierce. All the things we talked about, so how you stay ahead of it. I want to shift focus, shifting landscape. I want to shift focus and talk for a couple of minutes about staffing. Another thing I hear from firms and companies on a regular basis, constant, is I don't have enough staff. And Dan's going to talk a little bit more about this later on, but staffing is a huge challenge that every single business faces today. Well, I'm going to give you the good news. The good news is there are more accounting majors today, more accounting majors in American universities today than ever before. There's over 320,000 accounting majors today in American universities. That's great news. Dan's going to talk about numbers that show the growth, the demand for accountants. Those could be CPAs, or accountants or CPAs, but the challenge is the test takers are flat. The number of accounting majors is going up, test takers is flat. And that's a challenge we have to deal with. The question we get into is how do we encourage more people to become CPAs? And I'll tell you this challenge with that. I was talking with one of our members just before we started here today. The challenge, you go into school, and the 5th year is a challenge, but we need to encourage kids, college students, our kids and our students, to go for that extra year, to get the 150 hours, to make that leap. And it's a challenge. Dan's going to talk about, I'll tell you, my son, he did it, but I'll tell you, he got lucky. He did it in 4 years. If you're a 4-year accounting student, you can go out and you can make $60,000 a year. You can get hired by a lot of companies making $60,000 a year as a 4-year accounting major. So why should I take that extra year? Why should I get that 150 hours? We have to get people to understand that second job, that third job down the road, first job's great. Stop thinking about that first job. Think about that second job or the third job. When you're interviewing for a controllership and you're interviewing against 4 other people, having that CPA is going to make the difference. That may be the difference maker. One of the things we are going to focus on very heavily at the Society over the upcoming year is why should you become a CPA? Great, you're an accounting major. Why should you become a CPA? Try to encourage young people to go that extra mile to get that certification. That's important. That's critical. It's going to be critical because we all know the staffing and succession planning are one of the biggest challenges that firms and companies have today. Diversity. Successful organizations will embrace diversity. And this is one that I believe in very much, and it's great. You know, one of the things, I was just at I was able to attend our Mary T. Washington Wiley internship program, and Lester McKeever, who is really the the person behind that program and its inception is here today. Thank you, Lester, for coming and being here today, because it's cold, by the way, outside. So Lester is here today, but successful organizations have to enhance this is something that our profession is not, I'm not saying, the question is how do we do it? It's a challenge. I mean, the numbers are staggering. 3% of CPAs are African American, 13% of Americans are. 13 and 3. 16% of Americans are Hispanic. 8% of CPAs are Hispanic. We are not reflecting the general public, and that is a challenge. And it's going to come back because eventually people are going to come in and they're going to start encroaching on our territory again. They're saying, I'm going to hire people who I feel more comfortable with. So the question is, how do we enhance diversity? We're doing some things over the next year as a society to hopefully focus on enhancing diversity both within the volunteer ranks and also what we can do at schools. Our board was just down at the University of Illinois back in September, and the numbers there were staggering. Out of I think it was about 600 accounting majors, 600, and this is our flagship school, 600 accounting majors, they had less than 20 that were of diverse backgrounds. That's scary. So the question is, how do we encourage young people to go into the profession and then get CPA certification, because we need to become a more diverse profession. And the last one I want to talk about is multi-generational workforce. This is a great audience, by the way. It is, I think, the most age-mixed group we've had, so it's great to see. I'm sure that everyone in a firm brought somebody from, anybody over 50 in a firm today, I'm sure you all brought one of your young professionals to the event, right? So, we'll just keep going. But one of the things we have to deal with is multi-generational workforce. I always say this, I said, how many people in your office, how many of you sit and have headphones on, well, the big headphones on while you're working at your desk? Show of hands. Really? Nobody in here will wear big headphones while they're, even some of our younger people won't? Okay. How many people in your office, how many people have people in your office that wear the big headphones while you work? And at first you had to go, are they really working? Come on. Because it's changing. The way we have to view the world is changing, and that's a challenge. We have 4 generations in the workforce. That changes the way we work. It changes our work style. It changes our expectation. It changes all those pieces change. The demand for work-life balance has always been there. It's increasing. We have to figure out how to work with 4 generations in the workplace. So that was how we see where we're at today. A couple minutes on where we see the future going. Because the future really isn't that far away. I said this yesterday. I don't know if anybody's realized this. It's 2015. We're already 15 years into the 2000 decade. That is stunning to me. That's frightening to me. It feels like, we were just dealing with Y2K yesterday. That's what happens when you get old. I sit there and go, 2020, I would have told you 2020 was never going to come. 2020 is 5 years away. What's it going to look like? It's not going to wait for this, but this is what's going to happen. I look on the screen, you see a picture of a person standing at a desk. Well, that is going to be, that's not the office of the future. That's the office of today. At minimum, you see offices, and a lot of offices, where they may have workstations, but the workstation walls are now this high. And why do you do this? Well, tell me, if somebody can tell me, give me a word that is one of the most important things you want to have in your office of people working in your office. What do you want them to do? I think somebody said collaborate. Collaborate. So let's think about the American offices that's been filled. We made progress, I tell you. We used to have everybody in offices, right, with doors so we could all close them and no one have to talk to anybody. And then we went to workstations. Some people call them cubes. I like to call them workstations. I guess it sounds better. Don't know if it does. But, we had as high a wall as we could possibly have in a workstation because, we took out an office, but we really don't want you to have to see or talk to anybody, so we're going to put you in a workstation with the highest wall possible. Think about what that does and now we want people to collaborate. So what we do is we put them in places, and what do? They email the person next to them. They email the person next to them. So I think you're going to see, and I know some organizations today, you walk into some organizations, if they have workstations is this tall, or they just got rid of workstations altogether. And you know what? They're not crazy. They're not, you go, well, it's got to be mass mayhem in those offices. They're not.
That's what I tell them. I need quiet.
You know, it's amazing when you walk into spaces. I tell you, and again, my son works at KPMG. It's not that way, but they have workstations, and all the workstation walls are about this high. And you think it's crazy. I've been in his office. It's quiet as a mouse. You know, and now it's even quieter because, you know, people have headphones on. And by the way, no one talks in the phone because no one knows what that thing is even used for on your desk. So I agree. I don't think you're going to see that kind of situation, but in some industries, but within our profession, it's amazing how you adapt. When you do this, people adapt to those environments, and quiet exists.
I personally still like
Well, that gets that multi-generational workforce kind of thing. That gets to how we have to think about how things are going to change. Again, why? Because we want access to people, we want access to, we want people to collaborate. We want them to learn from each other. Let's talk about technology for a minute, because you always talk about technology. This is amazing. You know, it's one of the things you can't live and you can't without. You know, how many people, first thing you do when you get up in the morning, you check your email? How many people, last thing you do at night, you go to bed, you check your email? How many people, again, just lied? Come on. Really? That few people. My wife got a VivoSmart. Everyone know what it's like a Fitbit, a VivoSmart. It's you wear it in your hand 24/7. The only time she ever takes it off is when she's charging. And she puts it in sleep mode. And then in the morning, she goes, look, this is how I slept last night. Are you kidding me? I'm next to her. I go, I know how you slept last night. Dear, trust me, I'm well aware of it. I was restless last night. I know. It's amazing. We cannot live with it, and we can't live without it. How does it affect the profession, though? Well, I believe you're going to see some major things in the profession. Real-time auditing. Why can't we have real-time auditing? And is it going to happen? I think it is going to happen. Real-time auditing is going to happen. The question is, when you get to real-time auditing, how are we going to add value? How are we going to add value? On taxes. How far away are we? At what point in time is the IRS going to go, well, we get everybody's 1099, we get everybody's W-2, why don't we just send them a bill? Why do we have anybody file a return at all? We get all that documentation. We say, well, we got all the partnerships. There are millions and millions and millions of people who do not have partnerships. And the IRS is going to got to be a lot easier if we just send a bill out. What value do we then add to the process as certified public accountants in that world? And the last one I want to talk about is globalization. Globalization. Everyone, I know a lot of people in small business go, well, globalization doesn't affect me. Doesn't affect me. Well, recent study I read said that in 6 years, that's 20, I think this was by 2020, 80% of small businesses, 80% of all businesses will have a global component. If you're in the world of industry now, you probably do. If you don't, you should. Whether it's a supplier, whether it's a customer. 80% is going to have it, which then says, if you look at this room, only 2 out of every 10 people aren't going to have a global component. How do you live in that world? How does it affect standards? How does it affect staffing? How does it affect the profession and the work you do? Again, why are we doing all this? Why do we try to enhance the value of the CPA profession? Why do we try to do education, advocacy, information, and connections? Why do we have things to? It's all one purpose, and that's to help you succeed. I went 1 minute over, so I don't want to cut Dan short. Dan Rahill is our current board chair. He is the partner in charge of tax practice at FGMK. So without further ado, Dan Rahill.
Thanks, Todd. One comment on Todd's presentation today. I think that, the 8 years that I've been on the board of the Illinois CPA Society, this year and these 8 roadshows that we've done around the state of Illinois, they're the best ones I've seen in 8 years, and it's because Todd and also the information and the sharing we've gotten, and I just want to mention Lee Gould, Mary Lou Peer over here, members of our board, Jen, Todd and I went to the AICPA Council meeting in Boston, and all of these themes that Todd touched on today were discussed over 2 years. These are national and global issues with regard to our profession, and I think that Todd's presentation just now in the last half hour to 40 minutes really did a nice job of summarizing what took 2 days to really drill into in those sessions, and I'm glad we're able to share it with you because these are very, very important issues, and it's a time of change. When I give a presentation, I generally I like to tell people what I'm going to tell them. I tell it to them, and then at the end we wrap it up and I tell them what I just said. And I try to keep things into threes. So I want to touch on 3 points today, but within these 3 points, I will hit everything that with examples of what Todd talked about and bring it down to, as a practitioner for the last 35 years and member of the society for the last 34 years, I want to tell you my own story. The 3 things I want to talk about today. Number 1, get involved. And I call it, you get out what you put in. We'll talk about that in a minute. I want to talk about the brand. We talked about the CPA brand. I want to drill it down a little bit further to your brand as you're sitting here. What does it mean to you? And what do you as an individual mean to our profession, our state, and to the AICPA? And then I want to talk a little bit about core competencies and change. And I'm going to talk about change within all 3 of these areas. But before I start, I want to establish rapport. I taught new manager school, and many of you, most of you in this room, probably all of you, at some point, whether you're in industry, you're public accounting, government, tax exempt, have gone through something called charm school. I look at the demographics of this room, I think everybody, besides the fact you all look charming, have gone through a career in public accounting where you've gone through charm school. I taught it for 20 years, and it was a week-long course. Taught it my first year. I was a young partner at KPMG, and I taught it in Taipei, Tokyo, Budapest. I've taught it in Hong Kong, London, Montreal, all different groups and nationalities. And what we tell people as part of the session is, when you only have a half hour to talk to people, the first 5 minutes of that half hour should be spent establishing rapport. So right now I'm going to establish rapport with you. Most people don't believe accountants are funny. I don't know why, but that's the feedback I get when I'm an accountant. We get the eye roll. A lot of you remember, and I can again tell by looking at this room and the demographics, remember Bob Newhart, who used to work for Arthur Andersen, comedian from the 1970s, had a couple shows actually in the 1970s. Well, Bob Newhart was one of the reasons I thought that accountants were funny. And then I went to college, and I had a college professor that, actually originally from Joliet, who still has come to many Illinois CPA Society events as my guest, still teaching today, well into his late 70s now, but he always opened class with a joke. So when I took over the chairman role earlier in 2014, and I had to make my first address, I asked him for a joke. I said, I want to establish the fact that we are as normal and funny as everybody else as accountants. So here it goes. He sent me this. I'm not taking authorship of it. Young lady walks into a doctor's office. Doctor tells her he has some good news and some bad news. She said, doctor, what's the bad news? Young lady, you only have 6 months left to live. Oh my gosh, doctor. Well, what's the good news? You know that accountant you've been dating? Yes, doctor. Will that help me live longer? No, but it'll make it seem longer. All right. And I always say that's a self-depreciating joke, and only accountants will get that too. Getting involved, the first point that I wanted to make today about getting involved in the profession, and I call it you get out what you put in. And we look around the room, and Todd half-jokingly said, oh yes, everybody in the room, you brought a young person from your firm with you, and many of us don't do that. What I want to tell you a little bit about how I got involved in the CPA Society was 1991. I joined the society like everybody else when I passed the CPA exam in 1980 and paid my annual dues, and my firm reimbursed me for my annual dues, and that was it. I didn't get involved. Just like most people today in the society, it was just something you did. Until the year I was up for partner, and that was 1991. And our managing partner at the Chicago office here called me into his office, and I'd happened to be for 3 years in our mid-market practice, satellite office, back when we had those out in Oak Brook. So I wasn't as visible for 3 years downtown among the partners that were going to vote on my partnership, and the procedure was explained to me. And with a year to go before that vote, he said, we need to get you more visibility within the firm. And all the partners need to know that you are engaged in the profession. I said, well, Gene, how do I do that? And give me advice, mentor me, tell me what I need to do, what's missing. He goes, join a committee at the Illinois CPA Society. And I looked at him and I said, yeah, I can do that. And I said, what? He goes, anything. Get involved. Get involved. Best thing I ever did. Best thing I ever did from a career point of view. I called up. It just so happens, and she's sick of hearing it, but Jennifer Schultz, our CFO, and I became involved in 1991 together. She had just left McGladrey. I was at KPMG. And I joined Federal Regs and Legs, the tax committee, because I'm a tax partner. And I've gone through the committees over the years, all the way through chairing committees, the taxation committee, you name it, a lot of different committees. And what I've gotten out of that, and the friends I've made, and the people I know in this room, there's so many of you I would never have met if I didn't get involved in the Illinois CPA Society. And what's the message there? The message is our young people today, the people that Todd's talking about, that there are more accountants graduating, yet they're not taking the exam. And if they're not becoming CPAs, they're not going to be members of our profession. And I want to encourage everybody to get your colleagues. You're involved because you're sitting here today. But bring your colleagues, get your colleagues involved in the society. My own son is a member of the society, and he's young ambassador for his firm because I made him, as Todd's son will be when he becomes a member of the society soon. But his reaction to me was, after going to the professional leadership, young professional leadership conference, I wanted to get that right, was like, wow, what a fantastic event. Half day at the Mid-America Club. The speakers were fabulous. The topics were relevant. And Dad, I couldn't get anybody else from my Big Four accounting firm to come with me. And he goes, next year I'm going to try twice as hard because I know how great this is. Well, I'm pushing him. And then what I'm telling you is that, it may not be one of your children or a brother or sister or cousin, but someone in your firm, anyone, young up-and-comer, get them involved. Please get them involved. That's what I did, and it's really been an eye-opener for him. And now he's been asked to chair several different types of day of service and committees at his firm, and he's becoming known as one of those go-to people that gets involved. So it's farther reaching than just our society. It can change your life. Examples of things that we can get our people involved with: the CPA Day of Service, charitable advocacy events, the amount of push communication coming from the society, is tremendous. We have a tremendous communication group. If you don't want to read it, delete it. But there are so many opportunities there just waiting for you every day. I mentioned the Young Professional Leadership Conference. I don't know how many people were at that conference. I would say 400 or 500. Fabulous event for the young people that did come. And I enjoyed it as much as all of them. The town hall forums that you're at today, our annual technology show, our 2-day show in August, those are all examples of a way to get involved. And again, it's a matter of choice, but sometimes we have to push and pull other people to get them involved. Let's talk about the brand for a second. Todd's speech focused on the profession and the profession's brand, the fact that we are the #1 most respected profession of financial services, and #2 to physicians of all professions. That's wonderful. But what does that mean to you as an individual, and what do you mean to the profession? Each one of us, every day when we go out and we interact, and our staff go out and interact, and our managers or within a corporate setting, when you're representing the finance department or the accounting department, wherever you're at, you are representing the profession. And so think about branding yourself. And what do you want to be? Do you want to be known for integrity? Do you want to be known for creativity? Do you want to be known as the person that gives first and then gets? You have to give to get. Do you want to be the one that's the mentor? Because once you're a mentor, it's very easy then to become a mentee and then receive. So give to receive. I want to talk a little bit about branding and change in the profession and blend this together, really my last two themes, which are core competencies as well as our brand. First thing I did this morning, yes, I got up and checked my email, but I sent out a tweet. I sent out a tweet every morning. Today it had to do with tax planning for high wealth individuals. Very exciting stuff. I don't have many followers. But what I do and what I'm trying to do is brand myself as a subject matter expert. I'm a tax partner in that area. I do high wealth individuals. I also do corporate work. I've done it for many, many years, both public companies and private, now more private. And I want to share with you an example of how you can brand yourself and how you're never too old. I belong to an entrepreneurship group that meets once a month, 7:30 in the morning in a church basement in St. Peter's at the corner of Madison and Clark Street. And we go down there, and there's about 30 of us, and we have a guest speaker who's an entrepreneur, usually a startup company, someone much younger than I, who's already started and exited 3 or 4 companies, and I learn a lot. Well, one day, an individual who's become a friend of mine now gave a presentation. He is a software code writer for Google, and he specializes in Twitter. And at the end of the presentation, and a couple of us went up to him afterwards. I said, "Can you give us kind of a private tutoring session on how this works?" This was about 8-9 months ago. He said, "Of course, come on in." And he picked he invited 4 of us, all different professions. So we had an attorney, a banker, I was the accountant, and we had a business owner. And I want to tell you a little about Jack, the business owner. Jack's 84 years old, and he now, and he's not retired, he runs a party bus. And what Jack does on football weekends in the fall is he lines up these buses, and for a ticket of $200 and some, you get a football ticket, and it doesn't have to be a football event, but it started with football. And he'll drive you to whatever university, whether it's Champaign or South Bend or West Lafayette, and he'll line up 3 buses, and they pick these people up in front of Butch McGuire's down on, I think it's down on Division. I don't know, I don't go down there anymore. But Jack does. And so Jack, for the last 5 years, had 2 or 3 party buses going on different directions on Saturdays. He's sitting there learning about, and he also already had a Twitter handle. He had 200 followers before we took this training session. I'm sitting next to Jack, kind of learning from Jack as to how this works. Well, after the session, we spent an hour and a half together learning different techniques, how to link your LinkedIn to your Twitter. So when I send out a LinkedIn message, it goes automatically to Twitter. So I hit two medias at once, two touch points, as we call it in marketing. And Jack, a month later, I got together with Jack. I want to hear all about this. A month later, Jack and I get together. Jack goes, "I followed all the recommendations they told us in that training meeting. I've gone from 200 followers to 3,000 followers. And instead of 3 buses for the first game in September, this is during the summer, I've already lined up 8 buses and fully filled them up." This man had already doubled his gross revenue by using social media. And he wasn't 14 years old, he was 84 years old. And he was excited. He was energized. He's like, "This is great. I'm going to just take this to the next level." He already did take it to the next level. He wanted to take it even bigger. And I love getting together with Jack because I learn something every time I'm with him, even if it's just the enthusiasm that he has for learning and trying new things and the fact he loves people so much. And now I'm bridging the gap to core competencies, and the last point I wanted to talk about, and our change in core competencies. In how we're all learning, and we've got to do continuous learning. I, for many, many, many years, served a multinational company as the tax partner of a multinational company, General Electric. Probably some of these light bulbs are from General Electric. And we get together with the partners that served it, which would be about 40 from about 20 different countries around the world, and we'd meet, and we'd talk about, what industry is General Electric in? Yes. Everyone, from GE Capital to leasing to banking to lending to light bulbs to aircraft engines to washing machines to plastics. In my division was GE Medical in Milwaukee, which when I went on it was a $7 billion company and too immaterial to GE to audit. That division, to the time when I rolled off, it was 20-some billion, and yes, that was material enough to audit. And technology. Technology was pervasive throughout all of GE. And that helped me understand that it's not just the different verticals within the company, but then you had the different services across all the lines of the company. So just like in our profession, it's a matrix. And you've got your verticals, you've got your industries, and you've got your different services going across, and how complex this can be and understand. And now that I'm serving more privately held and mid-market companies, and I'm still doing a lot of tax work for public companies, but I'm doing more what I really enjoyed and how I started my career. Many of you started your career dealing with smaller mid-market companies, owner-operated companies, which is really fun because you get to really provide. They look to you for advice, and hopefully we're capable of giving good advice. But we kind of constantly stay, like Jack and Twitter being one example, in tune with the changing world around us and how these clients, whether big or small, or if you're in corporate, whether you are, the changing environment in your company and the constantly changing marketplace, and how if you don't react quickly enough, you're not going to be in business next year. I have one more example of change that happened to me. One of my son's college roommates also works in accounting here in Chicago. He's at McGladrey, and my son, who's at PwC, went and held a fundraiser for an orphanage in Africa. He, like Todd's son, got 150 hours in 4 years, and when everybody else went to get their 5th year, he decided to work at to help run an orphanage in South Africa, which I visited, and it was one of the best experiences I ever did. He spent 13 months there. And 55 children, all under the age of 15, all of whom's parents died of AIDS. And when I was there, we took care of AIDS babies. It was quite a moving and life-changing experience. Well, we held a fundraiser last summer in Lincoln Park on the rooftop of the apartment he had with 2 other boys. And these 25-year-old, 20-somethings all showed up. And it was a dress-up party. They all had to contribute $50, into the pot to come in. And that, and all the money went to the orphanage. And everybody had fun and felt good about it, too. It combined fun with service. My point, all the boys on this rooftop, call them boys, and they probably wouldn't appreciate that. All the young men on this rooftop, many of them were wearing bow ties. Well, if you're like me in my generation, I tried in my 20s and my 30s to tie a bow tie and never could. I cannot. And back in the day, when we would buy bow ties, they'd come with a list of paper instructions. And it'd be about 14 steps. You do this, you do that, and at the end of the day, I tried to look like Paul Simon, our old, political icon in Illinois, or who always wore a bow tie, and mine never came out looking good, and I finally trashed it and bought the fake ones. Probably many of you in this room too, whether you yourself or you helped a husband or brother try and put on a bow tie, it was impossible. So all these boys had real bow ties, and they're perfectly tied. So I went up to the young man, public accounting, and I said, "How in the world can you guys do this? How can I never get this?" And not just one of you, but there's eight of you young men here that just very dapper with their bow ties. How do you do it? And he looked at me like, "Really?" And I was, "Yeah, I want to know." He goes, YouTube. He goes, "That's how we do everything." He goes, "Don't you know?" And I was like, "Well, I know now, So my point is, it's a different way of learning today, and we segue into the society. And let me draw that into the society for a moment. We've been talking about this for a while, and the day has come. Where wouldn't it be great is my son, who's been at an audit, and he'll be out there at 2 in the morning, and the manager's gone, and he's got a question, let's say, on impairment. Or he's got a technical question with regard to financial fees and financial services, some sort of derivative question, let's say, for accounting. Wouldn't it be great if he could just pull up to the Illinois CPA Society website and get a 10-minute video and also get 0.2 CPE for it at 2 a.m. by himself, put the headphones on, study a video for 10 minutes, because we know at 2 in the morning, none of us are going to sit there for 2 hours, trying to learn a subject matter on a course. But 10 minutes in brief snippets, and that day is already here. That day is already here. So it just shows the change. I'm tying into going from bow ties to the accounting profession to learning, continuous learning, and how we all have to be open to it and push this down and how it's changing. And one more example that I'm going to talk about, Bert, is something you said this morning. This is a little scary, but Bert Good told me this morning that yesterday Microsoft came out with new glasses that actually you can see through, but like the Google glasses that are over on the side, what I understood you to say is they're real eyeglasses, but you can also watch video, see something, right? Holograms inside. Wow, I could be driving down the Kennedy doing a CPE course while, in my glasses, while, I mean, how cool would that be? So let me wrap it up by just saying, what I tell the folks, not young folks, any folks in this profession is, it's a great profession. Think about it, especially younger folks that are thinking of 2 or 3 jobs down the line. You are surrounded by the best and the brightest. And I've said this my whole career through my colleagues and people I've mentored. We are surrounded by the best and the brightest in the world in this profession. We're constantly challenged every day. Where do you get that? Not many professions. It's a great profession. And for me, being involved in this society has enhanced that a millionfold. And with that, I'm going to turn it over. Oh, I want to mention the chapters. So, I did want to bring out. I already mentioned Bert and Ted. If you have some, I know yesterday and in Oak Brook you have a few things you want to say, but these individuals, I'm just going to say, when we went to Boston and before that in other AICPA Society Council meetings, you have a group of the top 14 states. We're the 4th or 5th largest state, depending on what day you're counting. We're toggling with Pennsylvania. I don't know if we're 50 members behind at 23,500 and some. But if you bring in 50 more members, we'll move from 5 to 4 in the country as largest CPA society. We're one of the leaders, if not the leader, as far as chapters are concerned. And people coming from other states like Ohio and Michigan said, we just can't get participation in our chapters. So kudos to our organization for keeping those alive. And one of the things we need to do is breathe new, younger life into that next generation of Xers and millennials. I got to get off, but Todd said I was going to throw up, throw out, hopefully not throw up, some numbers about the shortage of CPAs and the reason we need to get people involved. And I just wanted to squeeze that in here. Back in 2010, I gave a speech to a group, and I was provided data that said there were going to be a shortage of 20 million accountants in the United States in the year 2020. And this ties into, the final point I want to make, ties into why we need younger people, we need a more diversity within our profession. This summer in Boston, we heard a very similar number, 17 million. So in the ballpark, they predict a shortage of 17 million accountants by the year 2020, and that's only 5 years away. Why? Well, we look around the room, we look at the demographics. There's 78 million baby boomers out here, of which I am one and Todd is one. 78 million of us. It drops down to 48 million Gen Xers behind us. So think about the demographics of what's going to happen in 2020 and beyond. Now, there are 84 million millennials, of which I call, and I have 4 sons that are millennials, and I've got one who's in accounting. So we need to bridge this gap. We need to do it not only through diversity, but getting younger people involved, getting them to join the profession, getting them, even if they're accounting majors and they weren't going to sit for the CPA exam, push them, mentor them, and show them what it's done for us. Show by example that what a great thing it is to become a CPA, because believe me, in 5 years, and it's not just in this country, believe it or not, there's going to be a shortage of accountants in China as well. I think there were only 5 countries I saw, which included India, Vietnam, Philippines, South Korea, and there weren't enough excess in any of those places to fill the void that we even have here in the United States, or going to have. So with that, I'm going to turn it over to Todd, and hopefully we had an enjoyable morning. Thanks.
Thanks, Dan.